Today, I would like to make the appeal that we need to be very careful what we are wishing for. Hello, my name is Caroline, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of my podcast, One Opinion from Europe. Now, Donald Trump and his insane, corrupt, and chaotic leadership has deeply concerned me over the past decade. And I was absolutely incredulous when the American people actually voted him into a second term. And I have been very concerned over the past 15 months. Sitting here in Europe, I view Donald Trump not just as a threat to America, but as we have seen over the past 6 weeks, he is also a severe threat to global economic stability and peace in the whole world. I find myself fantasizing over a world in which Donald Trump no longer plays a role, and have been very vocal about somebody should be invoking the 25th Amendment or at least impeachment. Somehow we need to see Donald Trump leaving this leadership, which he is just not capable of doing currently. Now, if we take a look at what alternatives there are for relieving Donald Trump of his duties, let's take a look at the 25th Amendment. I do not currently see that as a viable option. His very incompetent and sycophantic cabinet would need to vote on this with a majority. I think it's a 66% majority, which will definitely not happen. I know Jamie Raskin has prepared a letter. He is the head of the Judiciary Committee. He is the head of the Judicial Committee, and he would like to or demand that the White House doctors prepare scans, fertility tests, and various other medical analyses and publish these to Congress, because he says the American people have the right to know what is wrong with Donald Trump. We have seen his very insane and erratic behavior over the past week, calling for the death of the civilization of Iran, and also his vulgar statements on Easter Sunday. And there is definitely something very wrong with Donald Trump. So I think only maybe after the midterms, once Jamie Raskin becomes head of the Judicial Committee, only then might there be a possibility that we will get a true answer to what is the condition of Donald Trump's health. And then it would be still up to his cabinet to call out the 25th Amendment, which I just don't see as being a viable possibility. Now, the second alternative would obviously be impeachment. I think there would be a better chance after the midterms, when hopefully the Democrats take over not just the House, but also the Senate, that articles of impeachment might have a good chance of success. We have all seen his egregious crimes and the corruption that Donald Trump does out in the open. But if we think back to January 6th, where Donald Trump was actually impeached, he lacked the votes in the Senate to actually convict him of raising an insurrection against the American governing body. And I think a lot has changed, and the opinions are starting to change, and maybe the Republican senators might provide the number of votes, but I still don't see that as a very viable alternative. But it might be more possible than at least calling out the 25th Amendment. Finally, there's the other alternative, that Donald Trump eats his final Big Mac and leaves the world stage of his own accord. So if that happens, the next person in succession will be J.D. Vance. And so I would like to take a look at J.D. Vance and see what we could expect from this succession. So many of us have seen the film or read the book Hillbilly Elegy, which J.D. Vance wrote about him growing up in Ohio. He was raised by his grandparents because his mother had a serious drug problem. So he did have a tough childhood. However, he did make it into the military, where he served as a journalist for 4 years. And then finally, he went to study at Ohio University and ended up at Yale Law School, where he went on to study law, and I think he met his wife Usha there as well. Now, also a significant event that happened to him at Yale Law School was that he attended a lecture being given by Peter Thiel, a billionaire who believes that technology will have to crash and it needs to be rebuilt again, and that this is the only way forward for America. He himself is an immigrant, so it is very interesting how these immigrant billionaires are being successful in America. It was Peter Thiel who eventually gave J.D. Vance his first job in venture capital in California. J.D. Vance, after about a year or so, left California and set up his own venture capital company in Ohio. Peter Thiel then introduced him into politics and also to Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. He funded J.D. Vance's primary as a senator with a record amount, I think it was $15 million, and has always been a backer and supporter of pushing J.D. Vance, who will ultimately be pushing his interests in American politics. Now, J.D. Vance, we all know there is no love lost between him and Donald Trump. And even now we see Donald Trump has actually chosen J.D. Vance to perform the negotiations with Iran in Pakistan. I personally do not believe he has any qualifications or talents to do this type of negotiation, but the alternatives of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are even worse. We just have to remember how J.D. Vance was not even able to order donuts without making a fool of himself. And the other day when J.D. Vance was coming back from Hungary, somebody asked him on the tarmac what his view of these negotiations were, and he actually said, which sounded so stupid to me, that there is a misunderstanding because the Iranians do not understand English very well. Even if that were the actual situation, you do not say that publicly. That does not form a good basis to start negotiations just by insulting them. I am not very hopeful that these negotiations will go well. It is very clear that J.D. Vance is sucking up to Putin once again. I do not understand why. And it was very embarrassing to see him supporting Viktor Orban in his election, which will be held tomorrow. So it will be very interesting to see whether that helped or hindered. I personally think that J.D. Vance has the charisma of a dead fish. Strangely enough, Donald Trump, him being a liar, him being a sexual abuser, for some reason, he seems to have a certain charisma which his base, the MAGA people, seem to love. I don't think that is the case with J.D. Vance. So I personally would not be very worried that J.D. Vance will be able to win an election in 2028. However, if he does become US president just as a natural succession, whether it be the 25th Amendment, impeachment, or the final Big Mac, I think we are in for a difficult ride. But J.D. Vance is also very difficult to read. He has changed his name 3 times. He has changed his religion 3 times. Maybe he will take over and become a Democrat again. Who knows? He does not seem to have political convictions and is morally bankrupt due to this constant change in his approach to politics. Another reason why I don't think he would be successful in an election is because of the racist nature of MAGA, and J.D. Vance is married to Usha Vance, who we know has Indian origins, and she is not a Christian, so that would definitely go against MAGA voting for him. Obviously, it has been rumored that he might just change his wife and take up Erica Kirk, who knows, but time will tell. Anyway, to sum it up, I think we need to be very careful what we're wishing for. I know it can't continue with Donald Trump. Even some of the famous far-right people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, Alex Jones, They are calling for Donald Trump to somehow leave office, and I'm just worried about what the alternative will be. J.D. Vance was 40 when he became vice president, and he is definitely intelligent, which Donald Trump has never been. So what will await us once this change does take place, which I think is inevitable? I can't see Donald Trump's situation improving at all whatsoever. He clearly has a dementia problem and he is a malignant narcissist, which is a terrible combination. Here in Europe, J.D. Vance, when he made his address at the Munich Security Conference 15 months ago, that went down like a lead balloon. He insulted all Europeans, said we do not have an understanding of free speech, and then went off to meet, not with the German government, but he went off to meet with the AfD, our far-right party. And so he is not appreciated here in Europe, and it will still be a very bumpy road dealing with America if J.D. Vance does take over the reins. So let's wait and see. I hope I'm proven wrong with the negotiations and we do manage to find a peace deal, but I'm quite skeptical of this. So I hope this has been of interest to you, and I'm sure you have your own views about how and if Donald Trump should be relieved of his duties and for J.D. Vance to take over. What do you think? Please leave me a like and subscribe, and definitely leave any comments you have. I would be very interested to see how the rest of you feel about this. Thank you very much. Bye.